New documents released, as reported by the Minnesota Star Tribune, looking at how police responded in those minutes, hours, and then ultimately days after attacks on more than just Melissa and Mark Hortman, on Yvette and John Hoffman, their daughter Hope, but also two other elected officials' houses where Vance Belter allegedly went to with the intent to kill. Assassinations. One of the biggest stories in the history of this state, I think. Star Tribune report that just came out over the last hour had two major takeaways. One is that authorities identified Vance Belter as a suspect really fast, right within 3 hours of the initial kind of start of all of this, which was at the Hoffman's house in Champlin. So that was 2:05 in the morning. So by, in between 5 and 6 in the morning, they sort of knew who they were looking for. The other part has been this analysis of Brooklyn Park Police and their response. And this is all that's been reported. I've been on the air since these documents came out. I haven't seen them. So this is what the Star Tribune has up at startribune.com so far. But saying that Brooklyn Park Police, which I think everyone, even in the moments after, said did a brilliant job of proactively going to perform a wellness check on Melissa Hortman. They arrived at her house at 3:35 in the morning, and then they saw Mark Hortman get shot at the door. And so the question is, should officers have sort of ran in like it was an active shooter situation? The chief of police of Brooklyn Park is with us on the John Schuster Coldwell Banker Hotline. Chief Mark Bruley, who has been watching the reporting, maybe heard us talking last half hour about it. And Chief, thanks for being on CCO.
Thanks, Jason. I do appreciate it. And yes, I did. I didn't read the article, but I actually heard it on you speaking about it. I'm on my way to Duluth to actually honor the 22 SWAT teams that ultimately captured the suspect in this case. And I heard your story and just wanted to offer some clarification.
Yeah, please do. Why don't you go ahead? You have the floor.
Yeah, and I'm going to, we tried really hard. This is obviously a case that is being prosecuted. We're trying to not prosecute it out in the public, but we also understand that when information comes out like this, that people want answers. First, I want to just remind everybody that we are in the middle of an after-action report where we say in the state, the Denver County Sheriff's Office, Champlin Police Department, New Hope Police Department are paying $429,000 to have professionals that are industry professionals from all over the nation do an after-action review from stem to stern on what went right, what went wrong, what technology, and how can we be better in the future. And that is really the way it should be done on these national-type incidents where we learn from individuals that dig into this with the experience to be able to say what went right and what went wrong. And we are all for that. The problem is right here, you talking about one of the issues about running in, and I'll give some clarification for you. One is we say active shooter, but that's not actually a legitimate term. Like that is a generic term that people use. What we train police officers in is active killing, right? Because you can imagine if somebody had a knife in a shopping center running around stabbing people, we still want to respond in a certain way to stop the immediate harm in those actions. So the actual term that we train them is active killing. And in the active killing training, one of the things that we train officers, just for context, is a wounded individual, a down child in a school, or a down person, a wounded individual, is the same criteria as an active killing, meaning they're rescuable. We get them out and we try to save lives as we perform both missions. So just give you a little context, and we could doc, right? These officers train for weeks, a year on this. But I just wanted you to have some background.
So in this case,
how tactical this gets.
Because it was apparent that Mark Hortman was down from the training, that wouldn't be thought of as an active killing.
Well, yeah, let's go through that just a little bit. First off, one officer was there, engaged the suspect, who engaged in gunfire at somebody at the door. The officer couldn't see anybody at the door. He could just see the suspect talking to somebody at the door. Shots went into the went into the door. Immediately, the officer engaged the suspect with gunfire, and the suspect immediately entered the home. And then the officer, for a short period of time, exchanged gunfire with the suspect. By this time, the second officer arrived, and they had determined, right, the shooting stopped. That was it. That's all the gunfire that occurred was in that instant. The two officers came up with a plan to approach the house. They immediately started approaching the house and realized that there's a downed person at the door. From the body-worn camera and from the interviews, they believed it was Melissa. They have a conversation that she's down. She's heard us rescue her. So they immediately move up, enter the house. So we talked about they don't enter the house. So they do. They go into the house. They rescue that person and find out it's not a female. And by the way, they don't know who Melissa is, but they do know she's a female. And they get there and they rescue the male that is obviously critically injured, and they remove him back to a safe place and start CPR. There's no other information about where anybody is in that house. There's no other shooting. There's no other active killing indication. And in fact, one of the things that officers always have to balance, once they got additional officers that arrived on scene, now they have to make the determination, are we going to make entry in this house?
Sure.
But one thing about when we make entry, we go to shooting calls all the time. We just don't make entry because there was a shots fired. Our presence can actually incite somebody. For example, what if Melissa was in there being held hostage, and now we just come bum rushing in there, and now her life is in jeopardy because of our actions? So we're always trying to balance how to use technology and what is the right step in this case. And appropriately, the officers contained the house. There was no indication of movement, no yelling, no noise, and waited for additional resources to arrive. But that's how the events actually took place.
So when you say, as we're talking with the chief, Mark Bruley from Brooklyn Park Police, when you say that they didn't know who Melissa was, weren't those officers specifically sent to that house because of who Melissa Hortman was? Not that I think that should dictate what the response was, but at least you would know they were checking on Melissa Hortman.
Correct. Yes, they knew that and had to be given the address. I was just saying
they didn't know she was the speaker. They knew she was a politician, though, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, to a certain degree, when I think about how we improve our response to this, to me, it's more about communication of figuring out, look, do we have an appropriate or adequate way to notify, local law enforcement, to even know like where law enforcement or where elected officials live. Like, I think the fact that your officers had the wisdom back at the shop to say, hey, send somebody out to check on the Hortmans, I think was really great.
Yeah.
I do think, I think it's a fair question to say, are we, as much as you say there's a chance that officers could exacerbate a situation, there's also a chance that, she could have been alive in there. Or they could have caught Vance Belter, and you would have protected so many other people from potentially being in harm's way during this kind of day-long effort of trying to catch the guy. It's easy to back, seat driver this bit or Monday morning quarterback, but I do think the question of are we and maybe the ultimate question is it active or is it not? Because I do think most people would think if you witness someone being shot, I would think that you would go and try to intervene or try to catch the guy.
Yeah. Well, and you're absolutely right. And the details matter. And I mean, we're just going to keep chipping away at more, but let me give you context.
Which is good. Like over time, we want it. Like, I don't want to judge right now, like you're saying, I am so grateful that these communities are spending this money, because it is that important to get the facts and get the learnings right.
It is, but I want to give you a little bit of context about, so the officer knows that there's somebody at the door that gets shot. There's gunfire. They immediately, relatively immediately get up to the door right after they exchange gunfire. There's no additional gunfire. When you actually hear the gunfire that is very quick, it is not until long after that we're able to piece it together that he essentially shoots Mark and Melissa simultaneously. But the officer would have no knowledge of that. To even myself watching that video numerous times, it seems like one course of action. So you say like Melissa could have been still alive. There would have been no indication that he shot Melissa. Like that That gunfire that went so rapidly, any average police officer would assumed it was both at the officer and at Mark, who he had killed. But it wasn't like there was a big pause and gunfire again inside the house, right? Like there wasn't a second event. What we now know is that first event is when he shot Mark, he stepped into the house and almost immediately shot Melissa. But that wasn't learned until days later when we were able to put this all together. From the officer, with the information that they have at that time, when they're standing at that door, is that he killed Mark. We rescued Mark, and he's in that house, and we have no idea who else is in there. Certainly there's risk. Certainly, there's thought process. Do we try to take away some real estate? Do we fly a drone? And that is the tactical conversations that these men and women that do this job in really, really difficult situations have to navigate at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning about what's the right steps. And there is no right answer. If they go in and she's hostage and she's jeopardized, I'm having a conversation with you on why do they force the issue? Why do they go in?
Yeah.
Especially not knowing anybody else is in the house. So it's
fair.
What
it's
if,
fair. It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would leave it with this, a couple things. One, if that's me at that officer, I do the exact same thing as those two officers did. I think they are absolute heroes, and I think they absolutely did what I would have done. If I was there, I would have done the exact same thing with the information that I was presented with. The second part is I think you started to talk about it, and I think it's really, really key, and that is those officers don't interrupt him and take that vehicle away from him. I would be horrified by how many lawmakers are dead today, if I have to be really honest with you. Like, we have a tragedy unlike anything this country has seen, knowing what his motives were, what his intent was, what was in that vehicle for guns, ammunition, hit list, that interaction, which is horrific. Melissa was my friend, right? Like, I mean, I lost not only just a community member, but a friend that I've known and worked with for years. And if we don't take away that vehicle and stop him from having access to all those weapons and access to his other vehicles, this is an absolute tragedy of epic proportions.
Yeah. I think there's no question that's true. No question. Chief, really appreciate the insight and your perspective, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you.